Well, hi again, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. I'm Harper LaBelle, and along with me is our founder and our co-host, Vincent Turner. And today, Vincent, we get to talk about one of the living legends. He's both a collegiate and an NFL star. He started in high school as well. Let's not forget anything about how our athletes, the ones that we want to honor, had great high school careers that helped propel them into the next stratosphere in terms of their athletic careers. But Vincent, today we get to talk about one Lance Alworth, number 19. His nickname was Bambi, and that might have been a little bit light for him, but I think he got the nickname because he ran, he pranced, he jumped, he leapt, he did all kinds of athletic things. He looked like he was a deer when he was out there on the field, but certainly one of the great wide receivers early back in the days when the NFL was taking off.
Man, what can you say? We got a special football player that we're going to talk about today. And it's ironic that I attended the University of Arkansas. How great is that? But I want to say this to the staff of 100 Yards of Football. I want to thank y'all from last season. We had a great growth. To you, Mr. Harper LaBelle, for becoming part of the team. To our producers, Mr. Logan Landers and Mr. Jeremiah Long. To Mr. Stephen Travis out there on the West Coast, thank you. To Mr. Brian LaBelle, I just want to say thank you out of the kindness of my heart. Now, Mr. Alworth, tell you a true story. I was an 18-year-old on campus, and I went down to Wilson Sharp, which is the Razorbacks athletic dorm. And I didn't even know Lance Alworth had attended Arkansas. I knew of him as being a great football player. And I walk in, and they got this big old picture of Lance Alworth, Bambi. And I said, oh, my God, he went to the University of Arkansas. And see, Arkansas is a state of only 3 million people. And when you talk about Arkansas football, the history, he's probably one of the greatest players that's ever came out of there. He was a teammate with Barry Switzer. Remember, out of the state of Arkansas, Bill Clinton, Charlie Rich, Billy Bob Thornton, the great actor back in the 40s. Help me out, Harp. I know you watch a lot of Western. Alan Ladd with the blonde hair. And then the great Al Green. And for him to play football in our state, I can be more honored and proud today. A true Razorback. Back to you, Harp.
Well, Lance Dwight Alworth was born on August 3rd, 1940 in Houston, Texas, and his parents ended up moving to Mississippi, and that's where he basically grew up. He ended up falling in love with football. He was a great runner. In fact, his sister Ann was a good runner as well. When she was in high school, she ran the 50 and the 75. She ran some of the other races that girls were running back in those days, and she was even asked to participate in the Olympic preliminaries. She decided to decline, but thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Alworth, for great genes. You had speed, you had strength, you also had athleticism, and you passed that down to your son, Lance Dwight. And Alworth was born in Houston. They ended up moving to Brookhaven, Mississippi. And that's where Lance in high school ended up playing football, basketball. He was a fantastic baseball player. He ran track. I think he ran cross country as well. He had 15 letters by the time that he was done. Lance had the speed. He had the ability. He was a running back in the high school era, but he played well enough in the baseball arena where he was drafted by both the New York Yankees and the Pittsburgh Pirates. He ended up turning down both of those offers, and he wanted to play football. The University of Mississippi had recruited him, and he was going to go there, but he ended up marrying his high school sweetheart, Betty Jean. She became Mrs. Betty Jean Alworth, and Mississippi had a policy back in those days where they didn't allow for married players to be on the campus, at least not from a football recruiting perspective. A little bit different back in those days. But long story short is the offer that he got from the University of Mississippi was withdrawn, and that led to a relationship that he ended up getting and developing with a young head coach from Arkansas named Frank Broyles. And Vincent, you know all about Frank. Frank had started, 1958, 59, and here we are in just right about that time, and Lance was one of the premier players to help get that program started.
Babyface Nelson. That's what I call Lance Alworth. Back in the days at the University of Arkansas, the guy was just special. And like I said, he played on a lot of talented teams of the years he played from 59 to 61. Barry Switzer, Wayne Harris, Fred Akers, some very good football players. But getting back to Mr. Broyles, how ironic today would our Mr. Lance Alworth tribute. Frank Broyles is from Decatur, Georgia, and played for Bobby Dodd. And I still could not figure out how he ended up in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I know he's assistant in Missouri, but you would have thought Mr. Broyles would come back to the Atlanta area, but that's another story. But when you think about Lance Alworth, of course, you think about the 61 season, his best year. Think of all the players he was part of on that All-American team. Ernie Davis, Bobby Bell, Roman Gabriel, John Hadle. But it was word on the street, he might have been the best player on that All-American team. But what I'm so excited this morning and so proud is that he went to the University of Arkansas. I'm going to say it one more time. And if you've never been on that campus, Arkansas is a type of school that is up in the hills in Northwest Arkansas. And you really wouldn't even know the school is there. It's a small state, as I said, the state of Arkansas, but they're very passionate. They are passionate about their football. Look at it now, Razorback Stadium, 72,000. And then to have a player like Lance Alworth come out of there, it's special. Very, very special. A guy that had all the athletic ability. One thing when you look at Mr. Alworth, that you see on the screen, right, his image against the Kansas City Chiefs, he always looked like he was a ballerina in the air catching the ball. It was like watching a cartoon, some of the catches he made. And then the speed. And one person that talked highly of Lance Alworth said he was the best I ever went up against was Willie Brown. Said he hated the battles against Lance Alworth. But one other thing about Mr. Alworth, before I get into his pro career a little bit, is that he was most MVP in the Cotton Bowl, 1960, but he was an academic All-American his all 3 years at Arkansas. So when you're a Razorback, such as me, and I don't want nobody to get mad this morning, you know I got to do it because Jeremiah knows how this goes. Ooh, pig, suey. Ooh, pig, suey. Ooh, pig, suey, Razorback.
Hey, one of the things there in terms of the history of Arkansas, just getting started, Frank Broyles was putting some teams together and kind of changing things. And 9-2, Lance's freshman year, they win the Gator Bowl. 8-3 the following year. That was his junior year. His senior year, they go 8-3 again. They face Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. I mean, these are some good teams and some players that, you know, whether it be offensive or defensive linemen. The linebackers, tight end, everybody was pretty doggone good. And back in Southwest Conference, you know, the type of play that you were involved in and the schools that you were going against, if you could do well at that level, obviously the folks in the pros were going to be looking at you as well. But his speed and his ability to catch the ball, Lance had a saying that goes, hey, anytime it was up in the air, it was mine. And so he was one of the first guys to really, a 50-50 ball is what they call him today. But he wanted that. He was going to take it away from you. The picture on the lower right-hand side, yes, the ballerina, the toes are pointed, the knees are high. He did look, you know, like a deer. He ran like one, and that's from his track background. But his success, obviously, at Arkansas, mostly as a running back. He was a punt returner as well, and he led the nation in punt returns. He wasn't afraid to take a punt and try to run it back on somebody. So he had some great prowess and some excellent coaching. And obviously, by the time he's a senior, there are people that noticed his speed and his ability to get down the field with the football. But you mentioned one thing that I want to hit on as well, is that this guy was smart. He graduated early. He even he got his degree, but then he ended up taking some pre-law classes before he was done, and he was drafted in 1962. So for that semester, he started working on his master's. So congratulations to him being able to put both together, his athletic and his scholastic side, and making a difference at Arkansas. And Vincent, one of the things that really impressed me is back in those days, and there was a very rare time period where you had both leagues, the National Football League and the American Football League. The AFL was just getting started, and he caught the eye of a young coach for the LA Chargers, a guy named Al Davis. And Al Davis was interested in him, but also the NFL was as well. So let's talk a little bit about any additional Arkansas stats that you have, but what his pro career ended up starting like.
Well, as you just mentioned, he was in the 62 draft. As I said, one of the greatest players that ever came out of the University of Arkansas. And I think when you look at it, him going to the pros, think about some of the players that came after him that carried that great tradition at Arkansas. Chuck Dykes, Bill Montgomery, Ben Cowens, Dan Hampton. You know who I'm talking about there. I know you heard his name, Harp. Kenny Hatfield, Steve Atwater, Gary Anderson, who was one of the best football players I've ever seen up close and personal. But the thing I like about Lance Alworth, he went to the AFL. As you said, got drafted by 2 leagues. And boy, did him and John Hadle make string music. Boy, they were special. Under Sid Gilman and this guy. I wish people today could go back. And if you're watching this video, they go to YouTube and watch some of Lance Alworth's film back in his early years from 61 to 66 before the AFL and NFL merged. Man, he was putting people on skates. He was blowing by them with that outstanding speed he had, 9.6 in the 100 meters or the 100-meter dash. And another thing I'm going to take, and I'm going to give it back to you, Harper, talk a little more about his pro career, is that here's a guy that got interest from the New York Yankees and the Pittsburgh Pirates while he was in high school and at the University of Arkansas as a baseball player. He was special, man, all over. And he's the only player, I think, that's got a Super Bowl ring, and he's got an AFL championship ring before the Super Bowl merged. I think he's one of the few players. But it's no more that I can't say about him. When you talk about greatness, you talk about the ability to wide receiver position, Lance Alworth is a trendsetter. And when you watch these guys today, from Justin Jefferson to Jamar Chase, to Lan McConkey, and you watch all them gentlemen do it, Drake London, who had an outstanding game yesterday, let me throw some love for the Falcons. You better go all the way back. And Randy Moss, you better go all the way back to the AFL films early. And you better put respect on Lance Alworth's name. The mighty Arkansas Razorback, Pig Suey. Back to you, Harp.
Yeah, out of Arkansas, this is when the draft took place back in December. It wasn't the giant conglomeration of combine and the viewing public getting a chance to see the broadcast. It was much different back then. In 1961, he was selected by the Raiders, and I mentioned Al Davis, but the Raiders traded the rights to him to San Diego, and that's how he ended up getting to become a Charger. The December draft for the AFL, 2 days later, the NFL selected their players, and he was picked by the San Francisco 49ers in the first round. And he was talked into going to San Diego. I think the money was just a little bit better. I think the opportunity was a lot better because as an offensive player, I think he was realizing that the league would be wide open and his chance to play and to shine in an era back in the 60s where the Cleveland Browns were still the talk of the town and the Green Bay Packers were soon to be a run. You had Jim Brown, you had Paul Hornung, you had all these other guys, and they wanted to run. Well, Lance wanted to see the ball in the air, and what a difference that made. You mentioned John Hadle and his relationship with John. That was absolutely fantastic. The stats that he had with the Chargers are amazing. We'll go over those in just a second. But later on, he was traded to, near the end of his career, his numbers started to go down, and he was traded to the Dallas Cowboys. And then the picture in the upper right-hand corner and then in the upper middle, that really changed his life as well. He finally got to be a part of a championship roster, at least from a Super Bowl perspective. Wow, what a difference that made. The Chargers had been to the AFL championship game twice in the early 60s, but they ended up losing both times. So we'll go over some of the numbers that he had, but a great career and a guy that started leading the league with numbers, with receptions, with yardages, with touchdowns for receivers. In an era where that They didn't throw as much, but the AFL certainly did. And Vincent, once he gets to San Diego, things certainly changed for him.
Man, like I said, I just mentioned, just go look at the film, man. Go to YouTube, type in Lance Alworth. And another point I want to make is when he finally got with the Dallas Cowboys in 1972 and he caught that touchdown in the Super Bowl from Roger, the Dodger starback. And I heard a comment that said, finally, Lance Alworth is getting his respect as a Super Bowl champion. It's not no more I can say. Give it back to you, Hop. You can give the accomplishments what he did in the league. When you get the great Willie Brown out of Grambling State University, one of the greatest corners that ever played, said that Lance Alworth was the best he ever faced, and said it's no question about it. It's no argument. I don't have to say nothing about the man from the University of Arkansas by way of Brookhaven, Mississippi. Back to you, Hop.
In 1962, he only played in 4 games. He had 10 receptions for 26 yards. Think about that. He's averaging 22 yards a catch. 63, that's when things started to change for this young man. 61 receptions, 1,205 yards. 61 receptions in 1964, 1,235 yards. We saw Mike Evans tie Jerry Rice's record yesterday with Tampa for having 1,000-yard receptions. Well, Lance had 7 in a row, so he was the first one to do it. He had 1,602 yards on 69 receptions in 1965, 23 yards a catch. He had 14 touchdowns that year. Absolutely amazing what the numbers that he put together. When he went to Dallas, he played in 12 games. He started 11. He only had 34 receptions for them, 14 yards a catch. The second year while he was in Dallas, obviously the success with winning the Super Bowl, that what a difference that made for him. Finally, he got to get the ring and to be a champion. But he ended up with over 10,000 yards on 542 catches. So he averaged 18.9 yards per receptions throughout his career. The numbers were staggering. Obviously, the big play going deep down the middle, depending on who the quarterback was, Lance Alworth would come down with that ball. The receptions that he made, the difference that he did, that he had in terms of when he was on the field, the defense had to account for him. Where is that guy? We don't want him to be this deep. So it allowed for other guys to get open as well. So that's one of the things that I certainly admire about him. Give me some other thoughts about the pros before I go to some of the final numbers that we have for Lance.
I mean, Super Bowl champion, the ability to be one of the first receivers that was big time. Yards after catch, the skill set, his hands. What I like most about him is footwork. Let's look at there right now, the ballerina. Beloved by his teammates. Not one bad comment from any teammate that he played on that San Diego team or that Dallas team. What more can you say? He played with grace, man. Greatness. Back to you, Hart.
He has 12 NFL records that still stand, most games with 200 receiving yards. He had 5 of those, the fastest to 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 yards. He was the first one to do that in the least amount of games. He has Charger franchise records all around. In his personal life, he currently now lives with his third wife. They got married in 1997. He has 6 children. One of them died in infancy, but he was, from a family man perspective, 3 separate times that he had relationships with wives that 2 of them didn't work out. So it wasn't perfect life, but certainly it was made a heck of a lot better, Vincent. We're near the end of he's now 84 years old, but he had a pretty good day. He got into business realm, bought some storage facilities in San Diego starting back in the early 80s, and that turned out to be a nice little lottery gift for him. You mentioned that.
All I can say is some people, when you're greatness, you're able to bounce back from adversity. All I know right now, when I hear Lance Alworth, when I hear his name as a former University of Arkansas football player and a great NFL veteran, the Hall of Fame, I always remember this with his storage place. He sold it for $196 million. The mic has dropped. Back to you, Harper LaBelle.
Yeah, it's a nice payday, isn't it? All right, he was a first-round draft pick, both with the National Football League, And then with the AFL, he was a second rounder. He was a member of the Chargers and the Dallas Cowboys from 1962 to 1972. So 11 total years. A Super Bowl champion and AFL champion in 1963. He was the Player of the Year in the American Football League in 1963. He was a six-time All-AFL first teamer, second teamer in 1969 for one of those years. 7 times he was an All-Star. He led the AFL in receiving 3 different years. He was the receptions leader, the yardage leader, touchdown leader. He's a member of the NFL 75th anniversary all-time team. He's on the All-AFL team. He's in the Chargers Hall of Fame. His number 19 has been retired by the Los Angeles Chargers, and I will say that includes the San Diego Chargers. He's a member of the College Football Hall of Fame and the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He is Lance Alworth. Vincent, final thoughts about number 19. Tell us one more thing about Bambi that we would need to know.
All I can know is that outstanding football player. Also, I forgot to mention that Al Green is from Ford City, Arkansas. And when I think about Lance Alworth, I thought about him last night. A correlation with Al Green. You know, Al Green had his tune, Love and Happiness. Something that can make you do wrong. Lance Alworth, when he got to the AFL, he did wrong on a lot of DBs. So, of course, I got to send him off like this. As a true graduate of the University of Arkansas. Dun, 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 dun. Back to you, Hawk.
Give me one more pig suey. Just one. One pig suey.
Hey, suey.
1979, he was inducted into the Arkansas Hall of Fame. In 1988, he was inducted into the Mississippi Sports Hall of Fame. I've mentioned some of the others, so it doesn't matter where he was from, where he went, he made a difference. So he is one Lance Dwight Alworth, and we're glad to honor him here today on 100 Yards of Football. So on behalf of Jeremiah Long, our producer and engineer, and for Vincent Turner, our co-host and founder, I'm Harper LaBelle saying have a great day, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to 100 Yards of Football, the Legends edition. Thank you.